Caleb Elker here, and in this video, I'm going to break down the power of using AI, specifically ChatGPT, and enhancing SEO for existing content. So I'm going to give you 6 ways that you can quickly and easily use ChatGPT to rank your content or your client's content better very quickly. These are all analysis methods that we used to do all the time, but we stopped because they're incredibly time consuming. But with ChatGPT, we can get this done in just a few minutes. We used to rely instead on third-party tools like Ahrefs to do a lot of this analysis. But as I've said before, these third-party tools do not provide the level of data that the Google Search Console provides. The gold standard in SEO data is Google Search Console, so we want to use that whenever we can. Now, with ChatGPT, especially with the premium version, which you will need to be able to do this, you can grab CSV export files directly from Google Search Console and then give them to ChatGPT and ask for analysis. This is incredibly valuable and powerful in taking a website that's getting some traffic, getting some traction, and doubling, tripling, or quadrupling that. So let me give you just 4 quick examples for individual URLs where we've used these techniques for. Now keep in mind that these aren't for the whole domain. These are actually for individual URLs. So this first one I want to show you, we start with around 185 clicks per day, and we get that up to 350 clicks per day using some of these techniques. The second one, we're starting a lot smaller here. We start at 15 clicks per day, and we get that up to about 35. Now keep in mind, the leads for this particular client are worth about $30,000 each. So 15 clicks a day to 30 clicks a day is huge for them. Here's the third one, 60 clicks per day up to 130. And the fourth one I'm going to show you, 2,000 clicks per day and over doubling that to getting nearly 5,000 a day. So as I said, the increase in traffic from applying these methods between doubling, tripling, and even sometimes quadrupling the amount of traffic that you're currently getting. Now, it is important to remember this doesn't work for websites that are getting 0 traffic. You need some traffic, some existing content to be able to use these techniques for analysis. So I'm going to show you exactly what we did and how you can do that too. But some things to keep in mind before we get started. Right? Google can't read. It's an algorithm, and it's using things like word patterns and word usage to decide what content to rank. Then it uses offsite signals, quality links, to decide whether the quality of that content is good. Now, ideally, if you're getting some traffic, Google has user data, and if Google has user data, it's always going to rely on that to show that your content is good. So essentially, we use ChatGPT to reverse engineer what Google's algorithm is looking for so that we can then give Google's algorithm exactly what it wants. Something to keep in mind for ChatGPT, and I'll mention this a few more times. Number 1, ChatGPT will almost always give you a better output if you tell ChatGPT who it is, if you let it role play. So you'll see that I do this pretty often. I'll tell ChatGPT that it is an expert at doing whatever analysis I'm going to ask it to do. The second thing that you definitely need to keep in mind, we always use human editors to double check the content from ChatGPT before we run with it. ChatGPT and other large language models have an unfortunate habit of hallucinating. And hallucinating is just a nice way to say ChatGPT has a tendency to just make things up that are blatantly untrue. So don't take things from ChatGPT and then post it straight to your website without double checking and editing that content. ChatGPT also can produce very vague and generic content. That's exactly what it's supposed to do. So you'll also want someone to make the content more engaging for your users. But really, ChatGPT is going to be excellent at identifying phrases and keywords that we can take existing content and rank them higher for. It's also going to be excellent for helping us develop a true topical relevance map on our website. So let me head on over to ChatGPT. So here we are in ChatGPT, and like I said, one of the first things I want to do is tell it who it is, give it the ground rules. So the first prompt I'm going to give it is to familiarize itself with the Google Search Quality Evaluator Guidelines. So this is the prompt. Please familiarize yourself with the Google Search Quality Evaluator Guidelines and use its principles in any content request I make to you. You can find these guidelines here. Now, ChatGPT can't crawl the internet unless you get a plugin, but we don't need that. So I'm just going to remind it to keep in mind these guidelines. And of course, it's telling me, oh, I already know all that. But remember, ChatGPT gives you better results if you remind it who it is, if you let it role play a little bit. Okay, so now I'm going to jump on over to the Google Search Console. So this is the Search Console for a client of mine. I've hidden the client, but you can see the Search Console here. There's so much data available. I'll do a future video with just deep diving into how much data is available in the Google Search Console. So if that's something of interest to you, make sure you subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss that. But the first thing we're going to do is we're going to find an individual page to do this analysis on. So we're going to go into Performance, Search Results, and then we're going to click Pages right on top here. Okay, and then this is just a list of all the pages on this domain sorted by clicks. And the one that I'm going to focus on is the Smile versus LASIK. No particular reason that I chose that one. It just sounded fun because it has the word smile in it. So I'm going to click on that. And then you can see it added this box up here. So now I'm seeing results only for that particular URL. And I need that data. I need to be able to give that data to ChatGPT. So I'm going to export it as a CSV. And what that'll give me is a zip file with a bunch of little files in there. And the one that I'm going to start with is the file called queries. So that file, let me show it to you, it looks like this. It's every query that URL is ranking for, including the clicks, impressions, click-through rate, and the position for that query. Powerful data. And this is coming from Google. So unfortunately, this stops at 1,000. We can only import the top 1,000 queries from any given URL or from the domain as a whole. But no problem, we'll go with this 1,000. So we'll head on back to ChatGPT, and we're going to give it that queries file. We can just drag it and drop it. And then what we want to do here is basically, if there are queries that URL is ranking for, but those queries don't appear in the text, we want to know that, because if we add those queries to the text, to the content, then we're going to rank higher for those given queries. So a little shift enter there to do a couple of line breaks, and we're basically asking ChatGPT to do an analysis. You're an SEO expert. I'm giving you a CSV of Google Search Console data showing which queries this URL is ranking for in its rank position. Please analyze the URL's content below and make changes to it that will improve its traffic. Focus on adding queries the content is ranking for, whatever mentioned in the content. Please italicize all the changes you make to the content so you can easily evaluate how you edit it. So that's important. I want to be able to see the changes ChatGPT has made, so I've asked it to italicize those changes. And then I'll come back to Search Console, and if I click on this button right here, I'm going to open up that URL. This is the URL, and I'll just grab the whole thing. I'll stop at the end of the content, Control-C to copy it, back to ChatGPT, Control-V, paste that whole chunk of content in, and hit run. That happens, just hit regenerate. Okay, so now ChatGPT is analyzing this, and it'll take it some time. But the output is going to be very valuable. It's basically going to be a repeat of the content I gave it with some italicized changes that ChatGPT has made to add exact match queries to that content. Now, again, I'm going to make sure that my human editor will review that before I do anything with it. And because this is medical information, I'm also going to have my client review it. He's the physician that owns this website. I'm going to have him review it and make sure ChatGPT isn't hallucinating anything it shouldn't be. So the next thing I want to show you is how we can further increase the topical authority of that URL. We're going to increase the comprehensiveness and the authority. Now we do that by adding content that Google thinks is relevant to that URL. It doesn't matter if I think it's relevant. It doesn't matter if my client thinks it's relevant. What matters is that Google thinks that content is relevant. So the first step is to figure out what Google thinks is relevant. So let's come on back to ChatGPT. And here, I'm just going to ask it, based on the provided Google Search Console data, what would you say is the most important keyword for the content? Now, because remember, when we're optimizing a URL, we generally have to optimize it for one keyword. We're going to rank for a bunch more, but we have to choose one keyword to actually optimize it for. So it has said smile versus LASIK. So I'm going to grab that search query, and I'm going to come into Google, and I'm just going to type it in, smile versus LASIK. And this people also ask section. This is what I want to see. So I need more than 4 questions. So I'm going to click and open and close and get more questions to show up. And keep in mind, this people also ask section is incredibly valuable in terms of seeing what Google thinks are relevant questions for that given query. It would be hard for it to be more obvious that Google thinks these are relevant queries. Now, this is a lot of questions, and if I had to sit here and try to analyze all of these, that would take a long time. So I'm not going to. I'm going to grab all these questions, copy them, and I'm going to come over to ChatGPT, I'm going to paste them in, and then I'm going to come back up to the top and add my prompt. You are an SEO expert working to establish topical authority for this keyword. Please tell me which of the below questions are directly answered in the content and which are not directly answered. So I'll give that to it. So while that's running, the reason I'm asking that is because I want ChatGPT to tell me which questions are answered in that content and which questions are not directly answered. The reason I want that is because if the question is directly answered in the content I've already given it, when I ask it to write those answers, it's going to do a much better job at not hallucinating. So I don't need to focus quite as much on those as I do the questions that aren't already answered, the questions that I'm asking ChatGPT to answer based on information it finds on the internet and not based on information that's already in the content. Here's the results. We have the directly answered in the content and the not directly answered. Awesome. So now the next prompt I'm going to give it, based on the content provided, please write an FAQ question for the questions that are directly answered that will be consistent in tone and information to the existing content. Use only information provided in the content you analyzed to answer the questions. And I'll send that to it. So now I'm starting to write my FAQ section. And this FAQ section, I'm going to put at the bottom of the URL, right above the footer, below the main block of content. And this way, Google sees that this particular URL is answering all of its people also ask questions, a massive way to build relevance and authority. Okay, so it's finished answering the direct ones, and now the next prompt is quite simple. Now please write an FAQ section in similar tone, answering the questions that weren't directly answered in the provided content. Remember what I said before. Now, these answers, we're going to have to be very careful about hallucination. These are definitely ones that I'm going to have my editor and the client verify before I post this content. Okay, so that was that second step. We're building a lot of topical relevance by adding an FAQ section. But what if we want even more topical relevance? Maybe it's a very competitive keyword and we need more than just on-page relevance. We want deeper relevance. We do that by generating something that we call supporting content. So we're going to add additional articles that give deeper answers to the questions that justify it. But again, there are so many questions there, and I don't know anything about Smile versus LASIK. So it's going to be really hard for me to go through all those questions and decide which ones make sense for additional articles. Luckily, we have ChatGPT. So the prompt I'm going to give it is this: which FAQ questions that you've answered would justify an article to explore the question and its answer deeper? Please include the target keyword, a suggested title tag to maximize click-through rate, and possible headings for the new article. So we can see ChatGPT generating away, and with this suggested title tag, the possible headings, this article is going to be fairly easy to write, whether we use ChatGPT or we write it by hand, because we have a massive head start in all of these different subtopics and headings in writing this content. So we're going to go ahead and write that content, and then in the individual FAQ section, we're going to provide a link to that new article we just wrote. So in the question, is Smile better than LASIK for night vision? We're going to write a 1,500-word article about that. In the FAQ, there's 2 or 3 sentences that answers that question. And in those sentences, we're going to add a link to our 1,500-word supporting content article. Then that 1,500-word supporting content article, we're going to link back up to the overall Smile versus LASIK URL that we're talking about. ChatGPT gave me 5 recommendations. So that's 5 additional articles that I'm going to write and provide a massive amount of topical relevance for my primary URL. So that's enough for that one URL. Let's take a step back and think about the domain, the website as a whole. So your website, it has existing content, it's getting existing traffic. And what we want to do is a content gap analysis. So we want to think about what content do we have topical relevance for, but we haven't written any yet. Okay, so we have topical relevance, but we haven't written the content yet. So we're going to want to figure that out. And that can be very hard to do. Again, luckily we have ChatGPT. So to do that, I'm back over on the Search Console. And the first thing I'm going to do is X out this page because I want to see the Search Console data for the entire domain. And I'm going to export the CSVs. And we're going to get the same thing, a zip file with a handful of CSVs inside of it. The one I'm interested in is this pages. Unfortunately, the files have the exact same name, whether it's from an individual URL or from the domain as a whole. So for these ones for the domain as a whole, I'll usually add the word all at the end of it, but this is the list of pages. So these are all the pages on the domain, and it gives you an idea of the clicks, impressions, and click-through rate that we get. Now you can see the slugs here, like 10 foods to improve eyesight, 8 easy eye exercises. These slugs are very indicative of what the content is about. If you have slugs that make it easy to infer what the content is about, we can just use this directly. And by the way, you should have keyword-rich slugs. That is a good SEO tip. If you don't, then you're going to use the screaming frog method that I'll get to in a minute in order to create a new file that has the relevant information. For now, I'm going to assume that you have keyword-rich slugs that make it easy to infer what it's about. So what I'm going to do is grab my pages file, give it to ChatGPT, and then I'm going to give it a prompt. The prompt here is, you're an expert search engine optimizer, especially in the field of content marketing and semantic SEO. Please analyze the included pages.csv file that you have from the Google Search Console. Recommend additional articles based on the inferred topics from the page slugs that will improve the domain's authority and topical relevance. And what we have is ChatGPT doing exactly that. It's now generating a variety of new articles that I can talk about that I already have topical relevance for, I just don't have content about. So the next trick that we're going to do is a CTR analysis. So this is something that used to take so long. And again, with ChatGPT's help, we can do it fairly quickly. Now, in order to do this CTR analysis, I'm going to grab another tool called Screaming Frog. So this is the Screaming Frog page. And it's a free download, and if I come over to pricing, you can see that the free version does 500 URLs, and the paid version does unlimited. So in this case, the 500 URLs is going to be sufficient, so I'm not going to use the paid version, but if you have a larger site, then you're going to need the paid version. Let me show you how to use Screaming Frog to get the page titles and meta descriptions. Okay, so now we have the title tags and meta description CSV files from Screaming Frog. So this is Screaming Frog, what it looks like when you first get started. Now I know this can be a little overwhelming, but we're not going to use very much of the capabilities of this program right now. So we're going to put the homepage in and hit start, and this will get it to crawl. Now remember what I said, this free plan has 500 maximum URLs. That's going to work for us here, but if you have more than 500, then you're going to need to upgrade. All right, so now that the crawl is done, 100%, what I need here is the page titles and the meta descriptions. So I'm going to go to page titles and hit export, and that'll export that file. And I'm going to come over to meta descriptions and hit export there. And that's all we need right now from Screaming Frog. So I'm going to grab the page titles, I'm going to grab the meta description, and I'm going to grab that page's CSV file again from the Search Console. And what I want is for Google to combine this. We can't get title tag and meta description data from Search Console, so I'm going to ask Google to combine that data for me. So I have one sheet with title tag, meta description, and Search Console data. So the prompt is, using the Google Search Console CSV for pages which I've included again here, combined with the two CSV files attached, please assemble a new CSV file that has the title tag, meta description, URL, clicks, impressions, CTR, and position for each URL. Then I tell it to generate a new CSV, and I tell it exactly what columns I'm interested in the other CSVs, and make sure that I ask it to give me a link to download. Now, it's very important when you're asking ChatGPT to do things like this that you always ask it to give you a link. You need to download and check its work before you move on to the next step. So I've asked it to give me a link to download the result. And here's that result. So I have URL, title tag, meta description, clicks, impressions, CTR, and position. So this is very good. Now the problem here is this position data is absolutely meaningless. Unfortunately, if this position data were any good, this analysis would be very easy. But this position data is garbage. This is the average rank position that this URL has from every query it's ranking for. So if you're ranked for one query in the 3rd position, this average position will be 3. If you then do a lot of optimization to that page and get it to rank for 1,000 queries, the average position will probably drop because it's now ranked for so many, even though it is objectively a good thing that it's ranking for more keywords now. So don't use this position. What we need is the queries all file, which we've already downloaded. It looks like this. So this is the top query, clicks, impressions, CTR, and position. Now this data is valuable. This is telling me that this client is on position 1.5 for eye exercises, 7.9 for LASIK eye surgery, etc., etc., etc. So this data is valuable. The challenge is this is only the top 1,000 URLs for the entire domain. So for a domain like this, with this many queries, I'd be a lot better off if I downloaded the queries file for each individual URL and combined them into one file. I'm not going to do that because I'm doing a video here, but you should definitely do that if you have a client with this many queries they're ranking for. So I'm going to give ChatGPT the Search Console data for the queries all that I just showed you, and I'm going to give it the combined pages data that I also showed you that it generated from Screaming Frog. And then I'm going to ask it to analyze it. I'm giving you Google Search Console data for click-through rate, impressions, and clicks for the individual queries. I'm also giving you the combined file. Please analyze and determine which pages are receiving fewer clicks than you would expect for a rank position. This is important. Do not use the average rank position data in the pages.csv file. Instead, use the rank position data compared to the CTR data in the queries.csv and infer which URL is ranking for that query based on the title tag and meta description. So this is important. Given that a page will likely rank for its title tag first, the query that's ranking, ChatGPT should be able to infer which URL is ranking for that query. As usual, sometimes ChatGPT will make mistakes. It'll make the wrong inferrals, but that's okay. It's going to be right most of the time, especially because the title tag makes it super clear which queries that page is actually ranking for. All right, so it's finished its analysis. And I did have to ask it it didn't want to make a guess, so I did have to ask it to make a guess. Sometimes that happens. Not a big deal. It will usually give you a guess. It's best approximation if you ask it to. So here are some URLs that need CTR improvement. So what I'm then going to do is give it another prompt. I'm going to tell it it's an expert at improving click-through rates from Google search. And I'm going to ask it to give me new title tags and descriptions for the URLs it suggested. And you can see that's exactly what it's doing here. So the next thing that we're going to do is improve internal linking so that we can even further improve topical relevance across the domain as a whole. Internal links are very important because they tell Google what URLs you think are relevant to one another. So we're going to use ChatGPT to help us analyze the existing internal URL structure and see if we can do a little bit better. So for this, we're going to use Screaming Frog again. So I'm going to hop on over and grab it. Okay, so here we're going to need a list of all the internal links. So for that, we're going to come to bulk export. We're going to come to links, and we're going to download the anchor text. And that will give me a file that shows me every internal link on the website, along with its source, destination, and anchor text. Okay, now that we have the anchor text download from Screaming Frog, I'm going to go ahead and give that to ChatGPT, and I'm going to ask it to do an analysis. Just copy this, paste that in, and the prompt that I'm asking it, you're an SEO expert with a deep understanding of the best ways to structure a domain for internal linking to build topical relevance with Google's algorithm. I've attached a CSV file for internal links. And I'll show you what that file looks like while it's running. We have column B, which is the source, the URL the link is on. Column C is its destination. And we have column N, which tells me the position of that link. And column F is the actual anchor text. So then I basically break that down with ChatGPT. I tell it column B is the source, C is the destination, etc., etc. Now, and I've said this before in other videos, only the links in the content are important for internal linking. Links that are in the header, the navbar, the footer, they don't actually pass very much SEO authority, so we can safely ignore them for this exercise. And again, I'm asking ChatGPT to infer the topics based on the slug, based on the URL. If we needed to, we could always add the meta description and the title tag by asking ChatGPT to add that data into this file. Because remember, we do have that data. We have the meta description and title tag for every single URL. And we're asking ChatGPT to be super, super specific. We're actually asking it to give us specific row numbers that we should act on. And the reason for that is because ChatGPT, sometimes it doesn't like being super specific. Sometimes ChatGPT likes to be vague in general. In fact, it usually is vague in general. So we have to ask it to suggest very specific improvements. So here's the output that it generated. And here we go. It's giving me exactly the anchor text and what improvements should be made, source, destination. And it's giving a pretty good job of what we should be doing here. It's adding what URLs we should add internal links to, adjustments and changes. It's giving me the specific row numbers. So this is good information. It's pretty common that you'll need to ask ChatGPT a few more things to be more specific, give more examples. Like I could, for example, literally just say, give more examples of improvements that can be made, and then ChatGPT will go and find more improvements that can be made. So when you're using ChatGPT for SEO, the first thing that you need to be aware of, biggest mistake I see all the time, is you have to be aware that ChatGPT tends to hallucinate. I know I've said it before. So you can't take content that ChatGPT gives you and just post it on your website. You need to have a human editor review it, both for factually correct and to make it more engaging and interesting. ChatGPT's content as a whole is vague, general, boring. So don't copy it and put it right on the website. In the case for this client, it's clearly a medical field. So on top of having my human editor review it, I'm going to have the client review it before anything goes on to the website. So the key things that we did here. The first thing is we had ChatGPT tell us, based on the queries the URL is already ranking for, tell us what queries we should add to existing content. We know that content ranks better if it has an exact match to the search query. So we simply asked ChatGPT to help us add that. Then we built topical relevance to that URL by adding an FAQ section based on questions that we know Google thinks is relevant. The third thing we did for that URL is further built the topical relevance by adding deep dive articles about specific FAQ questions that were interesting enough to justify deep dive articles. After that, we backed up and we looked at the domain as a whole. We asked ChatGPT to analyze every page on the domain and give us recommendations for articles that we haven't yet written about, but we would probably rank because we have the topical relevance for it. Then we asked ChatGPT to do a click-through rate analysis and give us URLs that we can do better at from a click-through rate standpoint. And let me tell you, improving click-through rate is often the fastest, easiest way to get more traffic to your or your client's website. And the last thing we did was ask ChatGPT to do a full analysis of the internal linking patterns on this website. This is 40 hours of work without ChatGPT's help. And we've done it here in just a few minutes. Now, I have a video coming soon about the ultimate guide to using AI and ChatGPT in an SEO agency. So if that's interesting to you, don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notifications so you don't miss that. Below, give me comments on what types of things you use AI for in SEO, or questions you have about how we use AI to improve SEO and improve traffic. And don't forget, I really want to encourage you to use ChatGPT for anything that comes up in SEO. It's so often that something comes up, I don't know what it is, I don't know how to handle it, and I just ask ChatGPT. In fact, for an upcoming vacation, I asked ChatGPT to help me with a dining plan. It's incredibly valuable and incredibly powerful. So the first person I almost always ask for advice is ChatGPT.